Welcome to City Cinematheque, where the art and pleasure of the movies are the subject of serious discussion. I'm your host, Jerry Carlson, and I teach film studies at the City College of the City University of New York. Today, it's our pleasure to present the 2000 production, directed by Raoul Peck, Lumumba. This is the story of the revolutionary leader from the Congo, Patrice Lumumba. And it's a film that takes on many of the conventions of the biopic. We'll be talking about that and other things after today's screening. It is a pleasure to welcome again on City Cinematheque my colleague from the City College and the Graduate Center, Professor Boukary Sawadogo, a noted expert on African cinema. Now, enjoy the many pleasures of Lumumba. Welcome back to City Cinematheque. I hope you've enjoyed this opportunity to see Raoul Peck's really remarkable film, Lumumba, which tells us a great deal about Africa, tells us a great deal about the world, and has echoes of things, even of the level of Shakespearean tragedy. It's a pleasure today to have as our guest to discuss the film one of my friends and colleagues from City College and the Graduate Center, Professor Boukary Sawadogo. Boukary has appointments in Black and Cinema Studies at the City College of New York, and at the Graduate Center he's on the faculties of French and of film. In his native Burkina Faso, he's also, I want to mention, the creator of the Film Foundation Africa, which is an organization dedicated to teaching media literacy to African youth. This is in addition to his multiple publications on African cinema, including what is now a standard textbook on African cinema. His current project is No Part of America is Uninteresting, which will be about who is included and who is not included in national histories, a theme quite relevant, in fact, to the portrayal of somebody like Lumumba and his relationship to the Congo. Where does he fit into history? Welcome back to City Cinematheque, Boukary.
Thank you for having me, Jerry.
Always a pleasure. So one of the things we were chatting about this film is now about 25 years old. It's portraying incidents that are well over 60 years old, important, incidents of considerable global importance. But how do you see this film and its relevance today in terms of Africa?
In terms of Africa today, I would say this film is really relevant. It speaks to youth, and also if you need any reading lenses on what is going on currently on the continent when it comes to youth and youth civic organization, and also the current context of the war in Ukraine,
right,
where Western powers are pulling their hair, trying to figure out why many African countries do not align with the West.
Okay.
So this film, offers many entry points into what's going on, and those one of them is the current resurgence of Pan-Africanism on the continent.
Okay, talk about that.
Yeah, because you have youth accounting for, I would say, 65 to 75 of the population across sub-Saharan Africa.
65 to 70% of the population would be defined as youth in sub-Saharan Africa.
Yes, under 35 years old. So, and most of the unemployment is really hitting this youth.
Okay.
Hence, we have the migration and also all the, I would say, insecurity issues. So more and more youth are, becoming very politically involved, and for them, they see an African unity will be the solution that not only will further unlock the economic potentialities for the continent,
right,
and for them to be able to have a decent job and living, but also to have this pride to see the place of Africa and the trajectory of Africa in the world, which will be different with the current one, with the image of a poor Africa. But so if we have a United States of Africa,
okay,
it will definitely give a different image of Africa in the world.
And so what this film, the way it's portraying the kind of nationalist but also Pan-African notion of this moment of opportunity of the liberation and the independence of the African nations in 1960 becomes a kind of model of what hope had been in the past, how perhaps it was thwarted by forces both internal and external, and so the film becomes a kind of lesson in a history in which people can, as it were, attach themselves to the kind of vision that Lumumba had.
Yes, because if Lumumba is a nationalist leader, Pan-African leader, and we see in the film how he advocates for Congolese to have control over the vast mineral resources for their own development. And the same, we can make a similar parallel with youth today in Africa, where 60 years after independence, it's kind of disillusionment. This is a very rich continent in mineral, and yet in terms of development, in terms of being able to afford the basic necessities of every day, that's a challenge. So for youth, is thinking that if we add, or if we could have a greater control over our resources, so we don't need to migrate to the global north. We shouldn't be in this, very I would say power-stricken situation. And you take recently, you have like countries like my own Burkina Faso, which is becoming one of the largest gold-producing countries in Africa. Already you have Ghana, you have South Africa, you have Mali that's there, and you take oil. Beside Nigeria and Angola, you have Senegal, you have Niger. Other countries that's in the next 2 years will be gold-producing, oil-producing countries, and the youth is looking like we don't want the repeat of what happened with independence, where we have this hope for self-determination because in terms of resources there, and 60 years later we haven't really made progress to our own expectation. So look what we're having today in terms of resources coming up. And
well, and of course, this is one of the key narrative threads, based upon, deeply researched about the struggle over Katanga in the film, and who will control it? Will it, will it be the elites that are already aligned there, and with their alliances with foreign capital, or not, or will they be part of a larger Congo? And this question of that you're bringing up of who shares the wealth. The wealth is there, but how is the wealth distributed for the society?
Yeah, this question is of the national wealth distribution is as relevant as ever. Like the Nigerian says, now. It's it's irrelevant because if we look at first, let's take a historical look and then also look at the contemporary Africa. Historical look is, as I mentioned earlier, you have those resources, and very quickly, you have disillusionment with independence, the expectation, because in terms of development, it's uneven. How certain areas of different countries, because they're maybe politically connected or they're home to mineral resources, were more developed than other parts of the country, which has fed into resentment and also led to part of certain countries thinking that we're not actually be second-class citizens. And this has kind of opened the door to, I would say, secessionist movements.
Right.
where certain tribes, because they're spread across different national borders, thinking if we come together, maybe we can form a nation. And we think, and if you analyze that against the backdrop of the United Nations, all the resolution, or let's say the concept of sovereignty. So modern state don't want to redraw the borders, but within those borders, you have groups that see themselves as marginalized.
Well, and you bring up in turn this historical question of how Africa was divided among colonial powers, which had nothing to do with the social or cultural organization. It had to do with people saying, okay, you get this and you get that. And so what that meant in that original, colonization in the 19th century, the taking of control, is that groups that would naturally be together, ethnically or whatever, all of a sudden there's a dividing line. And one group is for the Belgians and the other group is, for example, with the Angolans. So you have an antecedent problem that these colonial states are themselves constructions that are unstable, because, aside from the exertion of the colonial powers, because they weren't made up in a way responsive to the actual cultural and linguistic geography of the continent.
Yeah, what is known as the scrumble for Africa,
exactly,
following the Berlin Conference, 1884 and 1885, is this artificial division or drawing borders according to the interests of foreign powers.
Exactly.
In complete disrespect with what was already existent in terms of ethnic groups and kingdoms and empires. And this issue still has its repercussion today.
Absolutely.
And today, what's one of the, I would say, factors in fueling terrorism in Africa, and I would say in sub-Saharan Africa. So you have parts of territories that see themselves as neglected.
Okay.
Neglected, and those are very, breeding grounds for any, I would say, extreme ideology to come and prosper.
Right.
So this, this really, ties into national distribution of wealth, and also some of the expectations of independence that, has not been fulfilled. But also we shouldn't forget that, you have, I don't want to use the expression of the Keynesian expression of the invisible hand. So you have the invisible hand also that you have to take into account in terms of foreign meddling.
Folding this back into the film itself, in a traditional dramatic structure, you have a protagonist who has any number of opposing forces. And one of the things that I find so interesting about this film as a biopic is the way in which it can't do everything, in that, but it does try to set up how many opposing forces there were against this, and it tries to dramatize those. So, and I think many things for people who have not followed this history will be initially surprising. For example, like the fact that now you're independent, the bureaucrats have left. So you have that vacuum of the Belgian bureaucrats leaving, but we still have the white officers in the army. As that. And so there are all of these kind of surprises in the deals, as it were, that have been made, and how those cause ongoing problems, because it's not at that moment it's not an independent army. It's it's an army that's still being controlled by people who say they left, but they didn't really leave because they don't want to give up those resources. And they also want to make strategic alliances that will be obviously in this case, the Belgians' favor.
Yeah, which calls into question what is independence.
Well, no, exactly.
What is independence, or political independence for African countries? So, which for many, circling back to you,
Right.
for many say, no, actually, we are not independent as we should be. So, to your question of different forces that I would say at the time Lumumba faced, but through Lumumba, Congo also is something that is relevant today, because we see already as Congo, when Lumumba is invited to Belgium, to Brussels, at what we call the table ronde, the round table to discuss what will be the contours of a newly independent Congo. We see already early in the film the intra-Congolese rivalries.
Exactly.
So you have on one end the political parties. So you have the Congolese national movement led by Lumumba, who will later see in the movie has the majority in the parliament. Then it will be nominated prime minister. But also on the other end you have the Moise Tshombe party from Katanga, which is a very rich province, and we will see that later that province will be, try to succeed from Congo for 3 or 5 years. And then you have Joseph Kasavubu, who will be later president also. So those political parties are vying for who they think is the natural leader, who will be the leader. So already you have intra-rivalries that weakened them in I would say in opposition to the outside world. And in the film depicts it very well. So we have this intra-Congolese, I would say, jambalaya, the Louisiana, expression that is ongoing. But also you have the foreign meddling.
Absolutely.
So you have the Congolese who don't want to leave at all to protect their interests, and you have the Americans there. You have other Western countries, and in the background you have not Russia, but the Soviet Union. That's rearing its head.
And wants to get into Africa for many reasons.
Yes, for many reasons. So we see that this Congo is there to be to be taken, and everybody is even among Congolese, there is no one set common interest about Congo to defend, and then you have what I can call the predators from outside. And the same picture we can transfer it today in present day Congo, where we still have the country, part of the country that we have rebellions, and a very rich country that has yet to live up to the fulfillment of its potential.
And so, again, just to loop back to something you were referring to earlier, I mean, as current as possible, the war in the Ukraine, and the question of Africa's increased, how shall I put it, interest in both China and Russia, who are interested in investing in Africa. And in an historical perspective, one of the things one has to keep in mind is, okay, you're going to be skeptical about anybody from the outside, but if you've been betrayed by other people in the past, why wouldn't you be looking for newer partners, et cetera? Even if you're skeptical about partnerships, what are they offering? How trustworthy are they? And so I think a film like this, a biopic that has these subtleties in it. I mean, this complexity of the number of players on the board can help us understand the complexity of the situation we're in. We're in now. Let's turn to this as Raoul Peck and as a biopic, because he chooses to this. Now certainly this is a film. This is his second film about Lumumba, because as you know, I think you probably even taught it at some point. He made an earlier documentary, about it, and the documentary, which I really recommend to people, really goes into his own family history, how his parents, as Haitian professionals, were recruited to be part of the new Congolese Republic to help, with variety of features there. And it really, his documentary about Lumumba really questions how do you make an historical documentary in a lot of ways, whereas this film, accepts, I think, a number of the, this is not a criticism, it's a description, it accepts a number of the conventions of the biopic, but faces it towards Africa in a new way. Now, what I mean by that, and I'd be interested in your commentary as always, is that if you look at a film like a very popular film, rewarded Cry Freedom, about Steve Biko, Steve Biko is the protagonist, but not the protagonist, because we actually get it through the lens of the South African white journalist. That is, we're getting his perspective on that. We're being guided by a white South African of admirable political position, to be sure, to understand Biko. Whereas here in this film, we have a direct presentation of Lumumba. So what do you think Raoul Peck is up to in terms of how he's using the biopic?
I think it's Raoul Peck in terms of, here, I think your question really relates to the narrative and
absolutely.
The sequencing of the events, which I see it as giving agency to Africans, because the story has always been most of the time told by the West.
Right, absolutely.
In relation to their encounter with Africa. So, but in this case, it's the African speaking in their own voice. That's why the opening of the movie, it's Lumumba speaking, and we have this very gruesome scene.
Right, absolutely.
I don't know if I should describe it.
Well, people have seen it,
Very gruesome scene where, his body is being, chopped,
right.
So that they can put it in a very, acid, solution just to...
They're literally trying to dissolve him. I mean, it's a metaphor of what they're trying to do in this place in history, but it's so, because this is a fact, it is how it was treated. So they're literally trying to dissolve the body so there'll be nothing remaining.
Nothing remain. And we hear, Lumumba speaking, speaking to his wife and say, I don't know how you will, could tell this story, talking to his wife, Pauline. I don't know how you would tell this story to the kids, their children, and through their children is meaning the future generation of Africa and also of Congo. And that's Lumumba speaking, as if the movie is just takes us back to say, Lumumba say, okay, let me tell you what's actually happened. Right. Here's these fateful nights, where I know, they took us to the savannah, to shoot us, and this is happening. But before this, let me take you to history course from,
absolutely,
seen from my own perspective. And that's interesting how Raoul Peck does that. He used historical, archival footage that we see throughout the movie, at the beginning and also at the end.
Right.
We see this where live action shots are interspersed with photographs.
Absolutely.
And for me, it's really, really, in terms of image, language, it's powerful, because if the viewer remember at the beginning, we have, it's kind of like a montage-like.
Absolutely.
Where he will, first show an historical picture of Congolese tortured or beaten, and the next frame will be the Belgian or Western at a partying, absolutely, where we see them toasting champagne or having delicacy food, And that is totally in contrast with the next of in the previous
image, right.
image, which is very, very, I think, in terms of contrast, is incongruous. At the same time, you know, okay, we have the same construction at the end of the movie.
Absolutely.
When the president, Mobutu, who made the coup, we said, after 1 year saying, okay, let's elevate Lumumba to a national hero. And we all can see the hypocrisy
Absolutely.
and of what is going on. But in terms of image construction, the film renders it well, while the film comes back to the gruesome images of Lumumba being killed and his body being chopped. And this very solemn ceremony of let's elevate it to, a national hero.
Yeah. No, I think that's where he gives voice, and as you said it so well, he gives voice and agency to Lumumba to tell his own story and to tell it from his side. But then there's this other narrator there, which I would call the invisible arranger, who is Raoul Peck, who's doing exactly what you described so well. He's outlining what in many ways the barriers are to understanding what Lumumba is, because there's been so many lies, there's been so much hypocrisy, whether those lies and hypocrisy come, from the colonial side, or it comes from the antagonists within Congolese society. And so that's how he privileges Lumumba's voice, that yes, let him tell the story despite everything they've done to lie. Okay, but that Lumumba's voice and his way of telling it will give us something rare, which is a biopic controlled by the African subject himself.
Yeah, if I can add something.
Please.
What I think is even more, I'm just thinking about it right now, where I think is even more powerful, the voice, the agency here, is as if Lumumba is coming back from the realm of the dead to set the record straight.
Absolutely.
Because it's dead.
Absolutely
and now
correct.
It's coming back, talking about the hypocrisy and all the lies, the contortion of the history. It's coming back. It's say, okay, I'm dead. This has happened. Okay, let me come back to tell my own part of a story, which say in terms of African cosmogony, for us, it's perfectly natural, that seamless interaction between the visible and the invisible world.
We're going to have to end on, but I think it's an absolutely appropriate place, because we're ending with an explanation of how this is not an odd thing, but within an African cosmography, this would be a way to be telling the story, because the dead may be speaking in that. Thank you so much for this. And thank you for being with us today as we screened Lumumba, and we had the opportunity to talk about it for these last minutes. If you'd like to know more about City Cinematheque, or more generally about City University Television, please visit our website, www.tv.cuny.edu. There you'll find information about our schedule, you'll find ways to communicate with us, comment, and be in touch. We would like to hear from you. So visit www.tv.cuny.edu. Boukary, always a pleasure to have you here, bringing your incredible store of knowledge. Look forward to the next time we can chat.
My pleasure, always.
Great. And thank you for joining us today. We hope that you visit us again here as we stroll the archives of film history.